guy on the roster who made a bad decision and got the benefit of not having a call go against him. But to me, what you said is true. That doesn't take away all of the things that the other 52 guys provided to get the Rams to where they wanted to be.
No, not at all. Like I said, look, the Rams did the exact same thing we talked about. They played the game and they played it out. They played situational football. They just kept swinging and they never stopped, and the calls went their way and allowed them to get there. Look, we can go ahead and talk about the Saints now. I was going to save it for later, but Eric, this Saints team, we talked about it last week from an offensive standpoint, they just didn't look as good. It seemed like whatever happened to them in Dallas, whatever they put on film sort of exposed them. And that's why I really didn't feel like this game was going to be anything close to what we saw back earlier in the regular season when they put up 80 points combined. It just felt like there was no way the Saints offensively had it in them to really get over 30. I felt at that point, and both these teams seem to be relying on the run a lot more going in, and it just felt like the Saints offense got exposed. But back to the Rams for a minute, I mean, I thought Goff's play and that drive he had at the end of the first half changed this football game, because he put a dime throw on the money that got them down and helped them get that touchdown that closed that game from 13-3 to 13-10, and it changed the momentum in that game. And every time they needed a big drive, he just made big-time throws. And I thought that was his best game I've seen him under the circumstances where the pressure was on him. The run game really wasn't as dominant. Todd Gurley's not even out there for half the plays on the field. Goff really sort of had to carry the offense at that point. So I think for Rams fans, they have to feel like, okay, the Goff we saw in the first part of the season, he's starting to come back now. Whatever happened there, whatever the law was, maybe it was the loss of Cooper Kupp. Maybe it was just trying to kind of find this team. You had Todd Gurley out for a while. Maybe now he's starting to get his swagger back. He's starting to get his confidence back, because he's going to need it in 2 weeks, because the pressure that he felt on Sunday is going to be nothing like being on the big stage, going through something he's never been there. This Rams team is a younger team. They don't have a lot of guys with Super Bowl experience. But Eric, what is your take on Gurley? I thought that he could be a game changer, and he would be the guy if the Rams won, would have to be the difference maker for him. And really, he did very little. He actually cost them early in this football game with the ball off of his hands. And then it felt like until he got the touchdown late, you really didn't see much of Todd Gurley. So do you think that the injury to the knee is what is causing this, or is there something else at play here?
It's very odd. I'd like to hope that it's something due to the knee, because a player of his ability and his magnitude can't be overshined by a guy like C.J. Anderson. I mean, if he's fully healthy and they're going with C.J. Anderson rather than Todd Gurley, I don't know what's going on. That's something that really will need to be investigated and addressed if you're a Rams fan. Because, 4 carries for 10 yards. Yes, he did have that touchdown. But again, as far as total offense, he had 1 catch for 3 yards. So 13 yards of total offense for a guy like Todd Gurley, who is really phenomenal for most of the year. I have to believe that it's something injury related, something where they said, okay, CJ Anderson has been giving us amazing minutes, amazing yardage out of that role. We brought him in a few weeks ago to do a certain job to basically cover our butts while Todd Gurley is healing, and he's doing a fantastic job. So if he's going to get that kind of run rate, why put Gurley out there if you're now saving him for the Super Bowl? That's my hope if I'm sitting as a Rams fan, is that, okay, we have bridged that gap. We have now gotten to the premier game of the NFL season. Gurley has another couple weeks to rest. But if we don't see Gurley in the Super Bowl and there's no announcement about an ongoing, more major injury than what we've been told, something's got to give there, because that's really odd for a player of his stature.
Yeah, I thought it was just, that's the first thing you think about. It's like, okay, it can't be some kind of performance issue. It's got to be he's just not 100%, or he's not bounced back from this, or they're really trying to take their time or something. He's just too important to them, too explosive of a player. And watching him early in the season, he was just a matchup nightmare. They could run him out of the backfield. He was getting tons of targets in this offense. He was a threat to get 100 yards on the ground and through the air. And all of a sudden, he's been kind of non-existent for this team. He had a good game against Dallas. He was over 100 yards. But again, C.J. Anderson out-touched him, and it was kind of put as, well, it was more of a cardio issue at that point, and we were trying not to rush him back. He hadn't played real football in a month. And he comes back in their most important game of the year, and he's been their best, most consistent offensive weapon through the first part of the season when they were playing their best football, and they're not really using him. So it's definitely going to be something to keep an eye on. Does he practice much this week? How does he come in? A lot of these Super Bowl teams will install their game plan this week so that when they fly to their Super Bowl city the week before the Super Bowl, all their focus can be on the media, and then they'll do their walkthroughs, but their installation and all their game planning is done this week. This is more their practice week when they're at home, and sort of everything's more normal for them until it gets blown up at the Super Bowl. So I think that's definitely something we'll keep track of. But they're kind of a puzzling decision, we thought. We were kind of texting back and forth about this. I know the group I was watching the game with, we were sort of feeling like, okay, do you go the conservative route here, or does he stay aggressive like we're normal with Sean McVay? And that was the 4th and 1 call. Rams down by 3. It was 20-17. He went ahead and opted to kick the field goal at that point, make it 20-20. Obviously, that's the safe play. You take the points on the board, you tie the game up, you put some pressure back on the Saints. But you had to know that Drew Brees at home was going to be tough to stop for your defense, and it all worked out for him in the end. But were you surprised that McVay, who's kind of a gambler, kind of one of the more aggressive coaches in this league, didn't go ahead and put his offense on the field and try to get the touchdown there on 4th and 1 at the goal?
I'll keep this answer short and sweet. Yes, I was absolutely surprised due to the fact that Sean McVay is one of those coaches that traditionally would take that gamble. But I was also equally impressed that he decided to kick the field goal, take the points. It's the most important game of the season. The only moment that matters is right now, and he trusted his defense. I like that. I mean, I like a coach who says, okay, I stand behind the 11 guys I'm about to send out into the field to battle Drew Brees and the Saints. I think that sends a message. It might pay off, it might not, but it sends a message when you get to the Super Bowl that, hey, coach has our back. He trusts this defense. And when we're ready to go up against a Patriots team, he knows that we'll go out there and do our job. I liked him taking the conservative route in that moment, because if he goes for that and doesn't get it, then we're sitting here on the podcast this week talking about, wow, is it really right for him to take that move in that moment and risk your whole season? And they didn't get it. And now, if they do get it, that puts more pressure on Brees. They've got to go down and do more than they did. So I get it, but I thought McVay showed a lot of maturity as well. I just talked about maturity with Goff. I'm going to talk about it here with this young head coach. He took the points. He played the averages. He trusted his defense. I realized there was more to come, but he sent a message that I trust everyone who's playing on this team.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with you there. I just thought, like I said, I thought it was the safe call at that point. You get the points. Now, you could make the argument, okay, he goes for it. If he doesn't get it, he's got the Saints backed up. If they could force a 3 and out, they have to punt it back, and he's got a chance again. Yeah, but if the Saints get a first down and keep moving the football, there's a chance you might not ever see it again as well. So I think you take the points, you put the pressure on. Look, it all worked out for him in the end. But for a guy that we've seen go for it on 4th down aggressively as he is, we talked about it earlier this year in Seattle in a game where he was fairly deep in his own territory late in that game, and he went for it on a 4th down to close it out. So he's always been a guy that is very aggressive, but I think he's showing a different style here in the playoffs that it doesn't matter if you win by 1, by 15, by 25. All that matters is how many points you have on the scoreboard at the end, and if it's one more than your opponent. I think McVay's starting to understand that as well. Eric, I touched on it a little bit earlier, so let's take a moment here to talk about this Saints offense. This was one of the most explosive offenses in the league earlier in this season. Especially at home. You could always count on the Saints when they were in the Dome to just put on a show. And it seemed like whenever they went to Dallas on that Thursday night, didn't have a great offensive output. We talked about it last week on the show, their totals. It kind of led me to get into where I felt like this game was going to be a depressed score from what we saw in the regular season. But what's going on with this Saints offense? Is this something where they sort of just ran out of gas at the end of the year and they became maybe a little bit too predictable in just becoming an offense that was centered around Kamara and Michael Thomas? Or is this a lingering problem where you have a quarterback in Brees that's older? He's only going to get older next year, one more year older again, a guy that's pushing 40 years old, and an offense right now that's, again, is very dependent on 2 guys. So is this something that lingers into next year with this Saints team?
I think it would have to if you don't address a few things, one of them being tight end and one of them being additional receivers. I think their running backs are pretty good. I don't think Ingram is the best bell cow back in the league. I think he's a good 1-2 punch with Kamara. Kamara had 11 catches for 96 yards in this game. It's not like he was unavailable and not productive. And Brees had similar stats to what Goff had, 26 of 40 for 249 and 2 touchdowns, only taking 2 sacks. So Brees, the consummate professional, absolutely performed. I have nothing but respect for him. Unfortunately, when you look at the game plan and you look at the fact that Michael Thomas only had 36 yards, and then you look at combined, Ingram and Kamara only had 46 yards rushing on 17 carries. That was combined. It just seemed like they didn't have enough going for them. And like you said, once they stumbled against Dallas's defense, I kind of wondered, and we talked about this a few weeks ago on the show, as they started to meet up with some of these tougher defenses, and here they are against the Rams, who, when you've got Sue and Donald, and I mean, you're just facing a line that's not going to allow you to dominate them. It showed, because there wasn't any holes for those guys to run through. They even didn't get, it's not like they were getting 17 to 20 to 25 carries. They combined for 17 carries. So clearly nothing was going on there. And when Breeze can't find Thomas, there's just not quite enough there offensively. And like I said, I respect the guy, but Breeze isn't getting any younger. And I know Brady's in the Super Bowl again for the 9th time. But boy, when we talk about that GOAT discussion in a few weeks, you're going to look back at a guy like Breeze and say, he checked a lot of boxes. He accumulated a lot of stats in terms of the counting categories, but only has that one ring. And I think that's going to matter when you're talking about the pantheon of QBs overall. So I think it's time for the Saints to start looking and deciding, what does the next 4 to 5 years look like? Not just next year, Justin, because boy, the Rams are here, and I don't think the Eagles and even Dallas and some of these other teams, the Bears, I don't think they're going to get much worse in the next couple years. So the Saints had a window here, and unfortunately, well, as we said, the refs and some situations took that away, and I think they've got some problems that they need to address.
I think you saw on the defensive side, they definitely have some work to do there still at this point. And look, losing players during the regular season is hard for any team, but when you get to the playoffs and you start losing key guys on your line, that's difficult to overcome at that point, playing the top talent across the conference there in a team like the Rams. And I just think offensively, you just saw this team where Ted Ginn's not the same guy that he was a few years ago. He's not the same guy. The only catch he had was on a ball that was underthrown and he came back for. So he's not the same guy. Traquan Smith is younger. Even in this game, Ben Watson was out. Hill got knocked out in the game. They just didn't seem like they had a lot of weapons. It seemed like Kamara was the only guy that gave them sort of a matchup advantage. And he seemed like he did a little bit of everything and had the ball moving for them. But it feels like they need to go do something at the wide receiver position. They need to go find a real number 2 wide receiver. And no, not Des Bryant. That's not going to work. That was trying to just put a Band-Aid on a bad situation at that point. They need to go find themselves someone that's proven, someone that can take some of the heat off of Michael Thomas, so you can't just take him away and all of a sudden you sort of stop this offense. So I think that's one thing they need to address in the offseason on this team. And defensively, Eric, I think they just have to be better. They had opportunities in this game to stop the Rams. And frankly, they looked pretty good early. And then in key spots where they just needed to get a stop, it just felt like they couldn't do it. They weren't getting a lot of pressure late in that game. Lattimore's a stud at corner, but they need more, it feels like. And I don't think Eli Apple is the answer. He wasn't the answer in New York. I don't think he's going to be the answer in New Orleans. So it feels like those are some of the keys that they're going to have to focus on if they want to make another run. Because I do think Breeze has another year or two, but I think they have to do more around him, because you can't just give the guy one weapon and then really not have anything else around him at that point in terms of the passing game. And yes, you have Kamara, but like you said, he's not a bell cow back. He's a guy that can come in and kind of be that spark plug for you, but he's not a guy that you can, at his size, can just run out there for 80% of your snaps. So it just feels like the offense just needs a little bit more, because look, the Rams aren't going anywhere. Not while Goff is under a rookie scale deal. Cooks is going to be locked up. Woods is a younger guy. Kupp will be back next year. We already talked about Gurley. I'm going to think that they would keep C.J. Anderson around to be sort of that 1-2 punch with Gurley, as good as he played, kind of even to be the guy as Gurley starts to get through his career as a running back, where Anderson can take some of those tough yards and not put all that mileage on Gurley. And that Rams defense, pretty good as well. Now they might have to lose some guys, but they're not going anywhere. So the Saints, if they're going to get back there, Eric, they've got to do a better job of getting more multidimensional on this team. Well, I think we've covered the NFC. It'll be the Rams heading to Super Bowl 53. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about the AFC Championship game and what went down in Kansas City on Sunday night. After that, we've got to talk about this story out of Philly with Carson Wentz. If you listen to the show, you know my co-host, a big Eagles fan and a big fan of Carson Wentz. Got to get Eric's take on the Wentz story when we come back.